So the dog over here, I was hoping to introduce her, but she's buggered off to the sofa and is now using my jumper as a pillow, which means it's going to end up very wet. She's a dribbly dog.
Do you want to kick off by telling the people about the last 2 episodes?
Yes, students of mathematics will have noticed that this is episode 21, and the last one that we posted to most places was, I think, 18, leading to the question, Ryan and Sam, where are 19 and 20? 19 and 20 exist, they're good, they're not very robot combat-y, so we didn't put them on the Reddit and on the Facebook and all of those places. Yeah, the Facebook, I just said that. I don't feel weird about that at all.
It's so old. It's going through the pipes to the Facebooks and the Reddits.
But yeah, you know, for anyone that thinks they don't want to listen to a non-Robot Wars podcast, I should point out that we did literally save Robot Wars in episode 20. So that alone is worth going back to.
You keep saying we. I can't take any credit for this. Ryan saved Robot Wars in episode 20.
You see, you can say that, but I can't. I don't want to come across as too arrogant. I'm arrogant enough as it is naturally.
That's 50 quid you owe me, by the way, for saying that.
Damn it. I'll let you use my speed controller once. How does that sound? That's like 40 quid's worth.
That's very kind of you, yeah. Very kind.
Does this count as follow-up to the whole ant weight thing?
We can talk about it, yeah, we might as well.
Key components have now been purchased. This is a big step.
Yeah, I mean, so it was a little while ago, I think in an after show at some point, we talked about the fact that we are both intending to actually build an ant weight. And yeah, key components have been bought. We both bought, at the very least, a speed controller yesterday. I don't know how much more you bought than that.
Nothing else.
So I bought a speed controller, 4 motors and 4 wheels.
So basically what happened last night was a perfect storm for me of having money in my bank account and Nano 2s being on sale. It was a good moment for me.
Yeah, and then Ryan told me about it and I impulse bought all the things.
I feel like we should give a shout out to Nuts and Bots, Alex Shakespeare's little e-store as well, for having them in stock in the first place. I think I saw it about half an hour after they'd been put up, and there were 8 available. At the time of recording, maybe 13 or 14 hours later, there's only 2 left. These things go fast, so I was very pleased to be there and actually get hold of one. This, to me, is like concert tickets to normal people.
Yeah, at least there's no ridiculous fees that we have to pay to some third party.
Oh, God, yeah. No, this is one of those things, you know, this is a website that is being run by someone who knows what they're doing and cares about it. So I always feel better buying from someone like that. And of course, they're made by Rory Mangles as well, so that's even better. I'm so much happier buying this way than I would be just getting stuff off eBay. It feels morally better, and I feel like I get to be superior about it.
I think it would be a lot longer before progress was made if it wasn't so easy to just go and buy bits that you had extreme confidence were going to work.
And on the website, he has got basically every component you need.
Yeah.
I probably should have just got everything at once, but I didn't have a clear enough plan in my head to feel that was a good idea. So I'm probably end up doing it again and paying for shipping again because, oh well.
I don't have a plan at all. I just thought, I want to build a 4-wheel drive robot and bought the bits that I knew I'd want for that.
Yeah, you seem to basically flip a coin in your head of 2-wheel drive or 4-wheel drive, didn't you?
I have settled on an idea now of actually what I want to do. So I've thought about a couple of different weapon things, and I think what I want to do is not be too ambitious. So I want to do a 4-wheel... I say this, not ambitious. I want to build a 4-wheel drive robot, which I think is probably a bit ambitious. And I want to do some kind of like a 4-bar lifter or something, I think is what I'd like to do.
Oh.
As long as that's not too close to what you were going to build. And if it is, then I will build something else.
No, I'm planning a really boring wedge flipper. And I'm going to have to pay royalties to Gilbert Grimm for inventing it, you know. It's a very expensive way of going, really. So you're going down more the sort of Storm 2 road?
I think so, yeah, something like that.
So yours should cost like 5 times what mine does.
I mean... I feel like I've probably spent more already than you will do over the... I don't know.
Really?
I don't know how much...
I mean, we bought basically the same stuff.
Well,
the stuff you've bought is stuff I'm going to have to get.
Well, you're going to get half as many motors and wheels and mounts as me.
Yeah, but that's insignificant compared to the cost of the speed controller or the transmitter.
The transmitter. I'm sad that the transmitter that I already bought with my dad, as far as I can work out, doesn't do DSM2, so I'm going to have to buy a different transmitter.
We just don't buy obsolete stuff in future. I say that I don't think DSMX is obsolete, but
Well, it's my understanding, and someone I'm sure will correct me now that I'm saying this out loud. It's my understanding that DSM-2 is older than DSMX, and then whatever I've got, like a Fly Sky thing, like FSI-6, and I don't think it does either of those things. I think it's some like different, potentially proprietary protocol for those things. I think I'm not sure. I'm not. It's hard. I think it's hard to find information about this. But yeah, so it's my understanding that the transmitter I already have can't be bound to the Nano 2 kit thing. So we'll see.
Now you say it, I think you're right about which way round they are as well. So I was wrong on every count.
So I think DSMX is meant to be like more reliable, and it's used for like in a lot of like planes, like RC planes and stuff. Yeah.
Basically, I'm going to use it because it's the thing I've been told to use.
Well, yeah. Well, I'm going to use it because that's the thing that this speed controller receiver combination thing actually supports.
Also a good reason. I mean, to me, this is just the ideal way to learn it. Buy stuff that you know works. Hopefully, it's going to turn into something that is almost plug and play with just more soldering. And from there, make mistakes with that to learn how to do it, your own way in future.
Yeah, this is what I have to keep reminding myself. I keep sort of trying to... I want to jump straight to the end game that I have in my mind, but I keep reminding myself that I don't know what I don't know at the moment. So yeah, it's why I keep trying to dart. Like over the course of this podcast, I've gone from wanting to build like an ant weight crusher down to a much more standard 4-bar lifter because I feel like that's actually achievable. So I keep dialing it back.
I still really like your grab and launch idea. I think your grab and launch idea is marvellous. I don't care if it would work or not.
I'd love to do it, but the thing is, so I was thinking about that, and it's like the sort of like receiver speed controller thingy we got. I feel like it's basically got 3 outputs on it. You've got left drive, right drive, and then one more thing that can control a servo.
Mm-hmm.
And I can think of ways to use one servo to do the thing that I want to do, with launching robots horizontally. I can think of a few mechanisms that can do that with one servo, but what I can't think of how to do in a reliable way is have that one servo also serve as some kind of self-righting mechanism, or build the robot low profile enough that it can run both ways up. I can't that's one of those things where I think I could probably do that, but I don't think I could do that on my first attempt, which is why I've gone, actually, I'm going to just do something where it's simple, where I know left drive, right drive, and then one servo to do the lifting arm will be enough. Whereas I think it's a bit riskier to do the other thing, which I think would probably need or want like another sort of output from the receiver, I think.
I think the trap here that we could both easily fall into is wanting to make something good. Whereas, for me at least, because I think you have more technical skill and more commitment and more patience than I do.
I don't know about that.
So for me, the aim should just be to make something that works. And I hope that I will be happy with that.
Yeah, I think once I get drive, I'll be very happy.
And you'll end up with a fleet of them within a year.
Maybe. I don't know. I was going to say sort of no, I don't get into something and build fleets of it, but it does occur to me that I've got several paper rockets that I've built, so
Exactly my thought.
I started building a landed variant of a Falcon 9.
Because of course you did. I'm fully expecting in like a year's time to come around to your flat and just see a waste paper bin with all the rockets in it, and the ant weights just taking pride of place where they were.
No, I'm afraid the rockets will always stay on display somewhere.
You say that now. The lure of the ant weight.
The thing is, I'm not sure where I'm going to put these rockets. So I've got the Delta 4 and a Delta 4 Heavy and a Falcon 9 on my desk, and then the parts for the landed Falcon 9. And there's not really much room for more of these rockets on my desk, so I don't know where I'm going to put any of this stuff. And then I still want to build a Soyuz and a Falcon Heavy.
Can't you just hang them?
I could hang them, but like I don't know, it seems a bit weird to hang them. The thing I'd love to hang would be a scale model of the space station. And I found plans for it. If you're interested in building paper models of rockets, you go to like AXM Space Paper Models is the website where I've sort of got on the plans for these things, and it's really good. They're really good models and easy to build.
Are they going to be as good as a foam core jellyfish though?
I don't think anything can quite beat that foam core jellyfish.
High praise from a keen model maker there. I did start doing a proper design for the nearest thing to a scaled one I could manage, but I forgot to save the file and lost everything, and now I'm just too sad about that to redo it.
That is upsetting. That is upsetting.
Because file management is hard. And I'm classing remembering to save stuff as file management.
I mean, that's step one in file management, is have files to manage.
Step one, file creation. Well, I think we're in danger of this turning into a very long podcast, so we should move on, as much as it pains me to do so, to these international specials.
Yeah, let's do it.
I suppose, as we did with The Last Jedi, we should put our cards on the table early about how we feel about these, which I'm doing just by tone alone.
I can tell already that you love these.
So you know how normally for an episode, I watch the episode of Robot Wars 3 or 4 times?
Yep.
I didn't put myself through that. I've watched both of these once.
Once? I mean, I was expecting you to say twice. Like, I've only watched them twice.
I didn't even subject myself to a second watch. Actually, I might have watched the first one a second time, which of the two was by far the worst.
Yeah, I agree. I think that was definitely worse. So I watched these back to back. I didn't watch them as they came out. I think on the Sunday that the second one came out, I sat down and I just watched them both straight through. So it was like 2 hours of Robot Wars for me.
Which normally sounds like a dream come true.
Yeah. It was a sense of, well, I'm glad that's done when I got to the end of episode 2, I'll be honest.
You know how sometimes we give a spoiler warning? This is the official complaining warning. If anyone hadn't already worked this out.
Well, so I do have positive things to say about this. I think they weren't that bad. I've been on a roller coaster. I was going from, this is going to be great because we're going to see Deer Tour and we're going to see Sergeant Bash, and I was really hyped up about it. And then you quenched that fire, and I'm glad you did. And I was expecting to just be the worst things in the world. So I went in with the bar really, really low. So the actual thing that I watched was fine. It was better than I expected them to be. But then, I expected them to be almost unwatchable. So, take that for what it is.
Well-managed expectations are important with anything. And I'm glad I could help you with that. I still don't think I have my expectations set low enough.
Oh, dear.
Actually, no, I think I did. But I'd built enough resentment over having to do so that I was going to dislike it no matter what.
Oh.
I think this is me being hypercritical and stopping myself enjoying things. But they're also objectively bad.
Yeah, there was lots wrong with them.
Fun game to play at home. What am I going to be most annoyed about?
I think you're going to be most annoyed about... So I think you'll be most annoyed about the tactical conversations that the team captain thing has with the rest of the team, in scare quotes. I think that's the thing you'll be most annoyed. If that's not the thing you're most annoyed about, I think that'll be high on the list of things that you're annoyed about. And I think the thing that you will have enjoyed most about this is the footage from the original series.
Interesting predictions. Largely incorrect.
Ah!
I mean, they're both on lists. They're both there. I'm kind of neutral about the whole using footage from the old series. I think it's nice that they're acknowledging it now, but at the same time, I think it's been done in a very tokenistic way. And I don't think it's added anything. It's not taken anything away, but it's not added anything. And I think particularly when they introduced the Bash, they forgot to talk about the actual robot because they were too busy showing us what we could have won.
Oh, the Bash was so disappointing.
I mean, that is my second biggest complaint, is the hype. I think it's unfair on the Bash team in particular, that I think quite a lot of people have taken their disappointment out on them as though they promised something, when actually the BBC promised it. And the really annoying thing is that quite a lot of people who watched this won't follow along on social media and won't have received that hype in the first place, so they're not going away disappointed. It's the people that care most about the show that do follow it around that will have been the most disappointed, apart from the sort of select few that go into the detail that we do and most people listening to this do in terms of already knowing that was bollocks.
Well, you say we. I think you already knew it was bollocks. I only learned that it was rubbish when you told me.
Well, yeah, but that means you knew, so you're part of that group. Doesn't matter how you found out, you put yourself in a position to find out. Or you fell into a position where you found out. It just seems so short-sighted to do that. I don't think it drew anyone extra in, it just disappointed people who were already there.
Yeah, I agree.
But yeah, that is only my second biggest complaint, and we'll get to the biggest in due course. I'll save that as a little surprise for you.
Oh, dearie me.
You don't sound that excited. Why not?
Well, because I have no idea what it's going to be now. I'm thinking of other format things in this. So they did a slightly different style of fight. There were the tag teams, and I have a feeling now that I say this might be the thing you were particularly annoyed about. I don't know, but yeah, the tag team fighting was the other sort of big change.
The tag team battles are okay. They did them in Extreme, and they were never that good, but they fitted with the conceit of Extreme because no one played by the rules anyway, and it was just there to be a fun thing. It wasn't heavily competitive, whereas this they've tried to make competitive. I think, as I say, they're fine. It's a way of having fights. It's given them a format that fits inside an episode with the number of robots they've got, so I can see why they've done it. I would argue that this would have been better just as a sort of old school World Series instead of trying to put robots in teams that were heavily mismatched. But it's worked enough that I'm not gonna really go to town on it. But it is a weird format. The tag team battle. It's a really weird idea.
It is odd. It's I think the best I could say about it is I guess it's sort of just different to the melees, the 3 or 4 way melees, but not. It's it's definitely not better, and I think if anything, it's probably worse.
I just think it's not even objectively that bad. We still get robots fighting. I think the teamwork element would be more interesting if they were just all going at it at once.
Yeah, that would be more interesting, wouldn't it?
Although, if you get 3 big spinners in there trying to cooperate, that probably won't end very well. But that could be amusing in itself. The other big change, and something that I think is then preparing for a hopeful Series 11, was battle music. It's something that people have been asking for a while, so it's nice that they've listened. I don't think they nailed it, but at the same time it did kind of work. There was just one track they used that I thought really sounded awful, which was that sort of weird old school guitar track that just never fitted the pace of a battle it was in.
I think that's probably the only one that I noticed. So I think the battle music works as long as you don't really notice it. So I wasn't really it didn't even occur to me that it was there when it wasn't before, until there was that one that just sounded out of place, and I think it was the guitar-y one. And then that's when I sort of wrote like there's fight music in this, and that's weird because it surprised me because in the AMA that was with the producer, they sort of said that it was an intentional thing not to do it because they wanted to just have the sounds of the arena. So I was sort of surprised that they'd seemingly gone back on that, and I don't know if that's just because it was the international specials and they were making it a bit different, or if it was if this was like an experiment and a test to see are we going to do this in Series 11 that we're definitely going to make.
I feel like they went back to Series 8 a bit as well in terms of some sound effects they seemed to be adding. There was this really weird sound effect they were adding for the arena flipper that I noticed in particular. And also, their slow motion sound effects are really bad. I don't know if this was just for these that they brought those back or done them differently, but they were terrible.
On slow motion, there was a fight where they slowed down footage that I do not think was filmed at a high frame rate. I think it was still filmed at 25 frames a second because it looked like there was a lot of frame duplication or something going on in that area. And it was like, I'm going to get a headache if this carries on. It was really horrible.
Would that be in the Big Nipper Terror Turtle fight by any chance?
The note I've got it in is against Terahertz and Tomahawk, but I don't know. They may well have done it in other places as well. But there were definitely times where they did slow-mo footage of stuff that I do not think was shot at a high enough frame rate to slow it down.
That sounds entirely plausible, unfortunately. The one that I noticed was the hit from Matilda on Big Nipper, which you already couldn't see because it was obscured by the pointless shark shooters would be great. Spark shooters on the spikes. So you couldn't see what was going on anyway. And I feel like they tried to slow that down and it just didn't help. All you saw was sparks behind sparks and then a lot of flames.
Yeah, I know the shot you mean. Not good.
I sat here saying that I had some good things to say, and so far I've not really got through any of them.
I feel like my positive things ended at this isn't as bad as I thought it was going to be, I think. We'll see if something else positive comes up.
It could have technically been worse. I'm actually going to say that the captain's thing had some positives, in that I thought Michael was really good in that. Michael Oates from Eruption, I thought would find that really difficult, but he was the best of the lot, I thought. Because as a hyper-competitive man, he just went in and said, yeah, here's how we're going to do things.
That really cracked me up. So I think the effectiveness of that team captain thing, I think, depended very much on who the team captain was. And something that I sort of noted was, if I didn't like the captain, that's probably a bit strong. If I didn't love the captain, I felt it was a ridiculous thing to have done, because the advice and the tactics was always just use your robot to do what it was designed to do and attack the other robot. Like, so it was like, well, this is pointless. You're not adding anything. And whereas I think, because I really like Michael, and so I was like, oh yeah, he's great. This is fine. Like, if it didn't bother me at all when he was doing it, but when the guy from like Deator was doing the same thing, it was like, this is stupid. Why is this happening? This is a ridiculous thing to do. All you're saying is exactly the same stuff that Michael was saying, which was just like, we're going to go and attack the other robot. But it's like, they don't need to know that. They know what's going on here. This is stupid. So yeah, I feel like, for me at least, the person that was doing it had a big influence on how I felt about it. But I do think overall it was just a bit silly and redundant. Like, why? What is this?
Every single interview or segment with Peter Redmond from Deator sounded like he was trying very hard to give the producers exactly what they wanted, but didn't really believe in what he was saying. And I feel really bad for him, because he's someone that has always, throughout his time on Robot Wars, been really willing to make a good show. And he was trying really hard, but at the same time, I think he was finding it quite difficult to, hype up the international team that was objectively terrible. And I think he felt awkward calling that robot Deator. Maybe that's just what I want to be true, but I got that feeling off of him that he was a bit sort of, people know kind of thing.
Yeah, I think the other thing that he was like there, and he was presented as being like brought back as this almost godlike figure from the original series. He was sort of like, oh yeah, he was this huge deal in the old series, and now he's back and he's going to dispense this amazing insight and advice on how to do whatever in Robot Wars. That didn't help him at all, I don't think.
No, and I mean, he is a very smart bloke. I think, hopefully, he's getting back into heavyweights for Robot Wars, from what I've seen and read. And I think that'll be brilliant. I think he could come back and make something really good. But to have to do it with the robot you've just been given and repainted, as far as I'm aware, he didn't do anything big on the internals. Maybe he didn't, it just never got spoken about, because that's what happened with Team Toad. Maybe he'd put many hours of love and sweat into that robot. But otherwise, he's just standing there with something that has fur on it, that he's got no real connection to. And he's still tried his best with it, to sort of be entertaining and be the character that he was being portrayed as. Yeah, fair play to him.
Yeah, I mean, like, the robot, despite not being Deator, did capture, for me at least, did capture quite a lot of the original Deator. I absolutely loved seeing it on fire again. Just seeing that fur on fire was glorious. And I think you could put that fur on basically anything and catch it on fire, and it would be hilarious. So, there was a lot of that magic that was still recaptured by this. But yeah, it wasn't quite the same, because it just wasn't quite the original Deator.
You know how I said there was one thing I was more annoyed about? Make that 2.
Oh dear.
Their final fight against Apollo, they had very, very clearly doused the top of that robot in something to make it burn better. Because when it first went on the flame pit in its first fight, it took a while to catch. As soon as it went then, the whole top was up. And there was a clear dividing line between things that were on fire and things that weren't. Which made me think there were some propellants involved.
I don't
And that
care.
was just the most conceited thing.
No.
It was
doesn't
perfectly
matter.
designed to annoy me.
It was glorious. It was majestic. I don't care how they achieved it. It was properly on fire, and I loved it.
I start to think you're a bit of a pyromaniac. Drones with flamethrowers, and now this.
If I told you this, when I was younger, I got like aftershave and stuff from my grandparents for Christmas, and I was like 13 or 14 or whatever. So it's like, well, I don't need or want or use this, and I still don't. But I did learn that this stuff has alcohol in it, which means it burns quite well. So I was always very pleased to get it, because it was more stuff that I could set on fire.
Do they listen to the podcast?
My grandparents, I don't think so.
I was going to say, just don't let anyone of your family know that, unless they already do.
I'm sure they already know. I'm sure it would be fairly evident when you went into my room sometimes that I'd been burning aftershave. Neither of these things are things that don't smell,
Slightly insane. That's always a good thing for Robot Wars. Well, any other format notes, I suppose, or should we get into some robots?
Well, I think we've probably already done the format, and we've already talked quite a bit about Deator.
Yeah, I mean, I can say more.
So yeah, let's carry on. Let's carry on with Deator. Let's put an end to the in quotes format notes, and we'll just move on.
I mean, this isn't a Dietor thing exclusively, but the loaned robots were terrible. They were not up to the standard of the other heavyweights they were being put against. When they were fighting among themselves, they were just about passable. But the fact that 2 out of the 3 of them almost immediately had their link fall out says a lot about the build quality. And that, for the record, is not a criticism of Robo Challenge who built them, because they were tasked with building 8 of the bloody things at once. So, you're not expecting a high build quality. They were there to get through one episode with celebrities driving them, which frankly meant that they weren't ever going to touch each other anyway, because none of them could drive. This, I think, was beyond their remit, their planned remit. But they were really bad.
I wonder. So so these were built for last year, were they? For the celebrity special, which I've still not watched.
Oh mate, you've got to watch the old celebrity specials now. You've primed yourself for disappointment.
Yeah, but so this is what they were originally built for. Was for that one.
Yeah, and it was really good in that they got basically 8 different weapon types across all the robots. They did a really good job of putting those together. It was very impressive. They all kind of shared components so that they could get them repaired easily. It was a really neat way of doing things. Just not up to the standard of the heavyweights are up against here.
So I'm curious then why. So I mean, I guess that some improvements or some like work would have been done on them, but like I'm curious as to why were they teams that were entering? Why were they not bringing all of them bringing their own robots? What stopped like the was it like Cathard or something? What stopped them bringing their own? Because am I right in thinking that was a borrowed bot? Like why could they not bring that? So that one, and then Dietor. I mean, maybe Dietor just didn't have one. Maybe they've not built a heavyweight in so long that they just didn't have one or couldn't build one in time. But like, it was my understanding that the Cathard people had a robot that they could, they're still in the game of heavyweight robots. Why didn't they bring a robot like, Tomahawk people? They presumably brought that with them, and then the was it like Rabid M8 or whatever? No, not that. Well, yeah, that one. And
Rabid was a loaner bot as well.
Oh, that was loaned. What was the flipper thing? The flipper from Russia.
Weber, that's their own robot.
Yeah. So why? I'm curious. What I'm trying to drive at is like why is it that some teams bought their own and some teams didn't? Is it just that they? Yeah. Why? What's the deal with that?
So, you're right that the Dietor team don't have a modern heavyweight. The Rabid team don't have a heavyweight at all. They only have a featherweight. So they both needed to be given something they weren't really going to be able to build for it necessarily. Cobra and Tomahawk have already been in the UK tournament. I think they just bring their robots over in a car boot, essentially, like everyone else does, but across a sea. By train, boat, whatever. So they can do that quite easily. The Weber team literally deconstructed their robot and brought it across in their suitcases.
Oh my goodness me.
And that's all achievable because their robot is only 70 kilos. This brings us to the American team, Team Toad, who would have had to have shipped their robot properly over, which would have cost a lot, and the BBC weren't willing to pay that. So what they did instead was took on a loaner bot, which used to be Arena Cleaner, and they brought over some of their own electronics and I think their own wheels and things like that to upgrade it as much as they could with the weight allowance they had on their flights. So the answer for Dietor and Rabid is there was no other option. The answer for Cathard is cheapness. One of these is a good reason. The other is a very, very bad reason.
Which one do you think is a bad reason? I feel like you could go either way on this.
Could I?
I feel like you could, yeah.
No, just being cheap is not a good reason.
I think that's a perfectly legitimate reason. I mean, how much would it cost? I mean, I guess it depends how much it would cost to ship a robot from America.
I mean, I don't know the exact figures, but I feel like on the scale of a program like Robot Wars, which we're hearing figures of tens of thousands a day to shoot, it's not going to break the bank.
Okay, yeah, so right. So if it's the BBC being cheap, then yes, that's a rubbish reason. But if it was...
Oh, no, yeah, it is the BBC being cheap, not the team being cheap.
I guess it was partly that... Well, I don't know. Would the team have wanted to front if it was a couple of $100 or whatever, you're like, well, you could have put it over, really, couldn't you? But I mean, if it was on the scale of approaching, a significant chunk of the cost of the robot just to bring it over to the UK, then yeah.
I mean, there are UK teams that go over to compete in robo games, which I think they do out of pocket, but it's only a couple. We never see American teams coming over to the UK to compete out of pocket, which says it must be prohibitive on an individual scale.
Yeah. I wonder how. So when all the British teams went over to China, did the Chinese people pay to bring their robots over?
Yes, I think they also paid for all or a majority of the cost of building those robots.
Wow.
Basically, the reason we have so many UK teams, and I suppose generally international teams, in King of Bots is that the company making it were willing to put the money up.
Yeah, that's cool.
Same as happens in BattleBots, but BattleBots also has a lot more sponsorship going on, I believe.
So when John Reed has been in BattleBots with Beta, then I'm assuming he built the thing over here. So the BattleBots, whatever network funded that, would have paid to take Beta over there.
I believe so. Yeah. I don't know if it's paid for in full, but it's clearly attractive enough to go over. I think he also has some US sponsors that help with the cost of it.
Fair enough. Okay.
Funny story time, though.
Okay.
Quite a well-known story. I don't know if you'll have come across it already, but when John Reed used to compete in the old school BattleBots, he would take kilohertz over, and apparently taking the axe through customs was quite difficult.
I'm not surprised.
So instead of bringing it back and taking it out and bringing it back and taking it out, he took it out once, buried it in some desert somewhere, and went back and dug it up when he needed it. Don't know if that's a properly true story or it's one of those things that has just developed to sound true.
I mean, I wonder if the kernel of truth was that he had an axe that was left in America and an axe that was over here. I suspect that would be the kernel of truth. Burying it in a desert seems a bit ridiculous, but much funnier. So I'm going to believe that was the true answer.
I mean, it does seem more convenient to just leave it with one of the other builders in their garage or workshop, but the sort of mental image of John Reed dressed as Walter White pulling over at the side of a road to bury his axe, I really like.
Just in his underpants.
Thanks for adding that bit. I thought that was inferred enough, or implied, whichever it is.
Look, I've not seen the program you're referencing, the name of which has escaped me, so I just want to check that I definitely got the reference you were making.
Oh yeah, you have. Well done. And also go watch it. It's not bad.
I'm sure it's not. I'm sure it's not. I've got so much television that you want me to watch at the moment. It's ridiculous.
There's literally one thing I've told you to watch, and that's episode 5 of the new series of Black Mirror because there's robots in it.
Fine. You and other people all wanting me to watch things as well.
Was it a royal you just aimed at me?
Retrospectively, yes. Gonna retcon that.
Audience, tweet Sam things he should watch.
No. No. Look, I'm still working through Seinfeld, okay? So you gotta let me catch up with the world.
God, imagine when you hit the 2000s in TV terms. It's gonna blow your mind with how crap it is.
Yep.
So yeah, dragging this kicking and screaming back to the robots.
Pah! Scrooge.
The quote-unquote upgrades made to quote-unquote Dietor were fur, eyes, mouth, and wheel guards. The wheel guards costing them the fight against Apollo, which I thought was quite funny. Rabid M8, they changed the shape of it a little bit. I don't know how much of that was just some aesthetic panels, but it used to be a thwack bot that kind of had a hammerhead on it, and they just went for a flat end. I think they were planning more of a sit and spin approach than an actual thwack botting approach, which seems quite sensible if you don't know how to drive one. Cathard, they did do a lot of internal upgrades, which didn't really seem to help. But fair play to them for trying to make it their own in the time they had.
On Rabid M8 then, can you explain to me the rules around active weaponry and whether or not they were enforced in the same way in this special as compared to other ones? Because I feel like at some point you've told me that robots like Stinger can't enter anymore because that doesn't count as an active weapon, and that Gabriel gets around this because it can sort of actuate its axe without moving the robot, and that Nuts 2 gets around this because it's got the melty brains thing. So it's like, is this just that Rabid has got some clever way of getting around that rule, or were they not enforcing that rule in the same way for this episode?
The answer there is I'm not sure. It wouldn't surprise me if it could do the Gabriel thing, but I don't know, the weight distribution looks like that might be tricky. I'd be more inclined to say that for Battle of the Stars in particular, they didn't care about the rules. I think a couple of the robots in that were already overweight, but they just let it go because, you know, it wasn't a properly competitive thing. So I think it's more Sunday rules than it is, you know, Rabid M8 is a good robot. I'm trying to remember what it was called. Oh, it was called D before, that's it. There's many jokes in it. Many jokes. Don't go on the Shunt posting group. Just save yourself. It's a rabbit hole.
A rabbit hole.
So yeah, were you impressed with Rabid?
No.
Succinct and accurate. Moving on.
What else is there? Cobra.
This is one of the highlights.
What?
I bloody love Cobra.
What? Ah.
I love any robot with a good drive.
I mean...
I still enjoy watching footage of old Storm 2 and Tornado fights, because the brutality of seeing something just plough into another robot and slam it against a wall cannot be beaten. Except by a very good hammer blow.
I mean, the drive, I guess, is the only good thing. The thing that stands out to me, which is being surprised to no one, I suspect, is that it's just the size of the ostensibly crushing jaw. Like, what could that possibly ever grab and do damage to?
What that does is satisfy the active weapon requirement.
which we've just established they don't need to satisfy anyway.
Yeah, but well, they have this robot that they want to enter into the main series. So they're trying to satisfy those rules.
I mean, it's just pointless. Well, I guess it's not pointless if it's satisfying that rule, but yeah, I don't know. Okay, then.
This is the nearest thing we have to an old school pushbot. And I think the series is better off for having some robots like that. Not a whole field of them, but a couple. You know, the way it dealt with Sabretooth was fantastic. That's a great fight. I'm aware you have an issue with bashy fights, but it was excellent.
I mean, that fight, I think that was lost by Sabretooth as much as anything else, because I feel like Sabretooth was just driving badly through a lot of that fight.
Sabretooth would be massively improved by a small feeder wedge onto the drum. Because Cobra's ground clearance isn't that low. They really showed that against Apollo. They struggled to even get close to getting under them. So I think with a good feeder wedge on it, Sabretooth gets that fight quite easily. But they don't have that. And Cobra can only fight the robot they're up against. And they've done a really good job of it. And I think it was an entertaining battle. I'm yet to see a boring fight with Cobra in it.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it was a good fight. It was a good fight.
It was Cobra, Eruption, Behemoth, and I can't remember who the fourth robot was in the melee in Series 9 that went to the judges and was brilliant. Was it possibly Foxic? It was a robot that never got to do anything because it broke down too quickly.
There's no way. Well, maybe that was Foxic. I was going to say there's no way there was Foxic in a great fight, but maybe if it broke down and did nothing, then sure, maybe it was Foxic.
But no, I don't think Foxic was in the heat. I can't remember off the top of my head, and it's really annoying me. Anyway, it was a great fight. Cobra's always in good fights, and you're wrong.
Do Cobra know about the rules surrounding the button? Because they hit that thing a lot of times, and it obviously only worked once.
Oh, sweet consistency. Cathard got away with hitting it a couple of times.
Yeah, I know, yeah.
I mean, Cobra looks a bit silly because it didn't work, but if it had gone off, it would have worked for him, so...
Yeah. I get the distinct impression that maybe are you like secretly one of the producers on this, bringing your inconsistency to Robot Wars?
Yes, I'm one of the producers undercover on a podcast routinely criticising the production of the show. It's a false flag.
You know, maybe you're one of the producers that's like not high in the chain. Maybe you're just trying to get at someone that's above you.
I'm actually the pit release operator. Man, I would take that job just to be involved with Robot Wars. And I'd be good at it. I'd be watching that thing like a hawk.
You'd have to do a darn sight more than breathe on it for it to go off for you.
I think that's just someone who's been doing it for 2 series and has got bored of it not being pressed enough and has gone, it'll do. Although I can't think of an instance in these episodes where that happened.
I think it got breathed on at some point and went off.
I don't remember it, but I will freely accept that probably happened.
I'm going to search my notes. One second.
This needs some hold music. Was that the start of the Crystal Maze theme tune?
Not intentionally, no.
Dun 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 dun.
So right.
Oh, don't interrupt me.
Yeah, but then I'm
Fine,
done.
Carry on with your content.
I found the note that I wanted to tell you in episode 2. In round 2, Thor versus Bash. Tough as Nails fires it twice, and at some point, Fog of War is triggered by a ghost. I think there's a ghost of Tough as Nails that goes near the button that fires it.
That's an interesting Fog of War all around. Because they didn't make any attempt to make it look foggy. They just showed a wide shot of the 2 robots fighting in the middle where there wasn't any fog. They have really given up on Fog of War.
Yeah. As well they should.
I must admit, as much as I didn't enjoy these episodes, there are some really good signs of the producers getting it. You know, they're trying out the battle music. I don't think it's a full-on success, but fair play for trying it. They're abandoning the fog of war. Yes. And they've attempted to do a good judges segment. So, you know, there's definitely some positives coming from this. It's just that none of them are to do with the fighting. Our final international competitor for the first episode is Tomahawk.
Yes.
I really like Axes.
Yeah, I know.
I was really excited to see Tomahawk in the main series when they first came along in series 9, I want to say.
I believe you.
Yeah, it was, because they were up against a working version of Sabretooth. And, you know, they participated in that. They were there. They were about as good as you'd expect an axe strapped to a shoebox to be. And it seems like they haven't really made any upgrades since. It seems like fundamentally the same robot, just sort of weirdly ineffective.
Has this robot changed hands as well?
John Reed kind of gave that game away, didn't he? When he said, I gave this axe to the original builder. I think, and I can't be sure of this, but because I saw him working on it in the pits in part of one of the episodes in the background, I think, and I'm going to butcher this name, Jérôme from the Bash team, or Tough as Nails, I think he might be the original builder, or at least a previous owner. I could be wrong on that. The information is probably out there for me to go and check, but that means reaching around my microphone, and that's going to be annoying. So you're welcome to do it, but I think that's the original owner.
I mean, I'm on the Robot Wars Wikia site.
Well, check that stuff out.
Tomahawk was entered into Series 7 by Paul Kendrick, builder and team captain.
Oh, okay. That's the very original builder by the sounds of it then.
And then it looks like it was the Team Dutch Robot Girls who then entered, who seem to be the current owners who have entered it into this and other things.
Okay, so maybe me seeing them help out in the background was just normal Roboteer helpfulness.
Yeah.
I'm sure I have recollection of it being on the Dutch live scene, if there is such a thing, for a while, under different ownership, but who knows? They've definitely had it for a while because they entered it into Series 9. Yeah.
Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah, I've been underwhelmed by it. Although it is nice to see that it at least has enough power to break itself.
Which
really is
good,
the true test of a robot.
Yeah, if it can take its own weapon off, then you're doing well.
Not an isolated incident either, of course. Some serious metal fatigue on another axe in the shape of Shunt.
Oh, yeah, that thing shattered as well, yeah.
I mean, it's a good demonstration of the force going through these things. I think it's easy to underestimate that when you see it just bouncing off of armour like it tends to. But that thing has got some serious force behind it. The difference between Tomahawk and Shunt is that Shunt doesn't miss as often, so it's taken longer for it to break.
This is true. I saw a picture of Thor with its axe properly bent as well recently.
Oh, was that from last series? Sorry, as in Series 9, where I think he had an issue where it bent, so he just turned it around and hoped it wouldn't break.
No, I think it was a much more like traditional axe-shaped axe head. This was posted quite recently. It might have been from the thing in Dublin or whatever, but it was just it was almost at 90 degrees. It was quite impressively bent. So
I'm guessing the issue there is like it was with Tomahawk and Shunt, that where it's hitting the stop, it's bent.
No, the actual axe head was bent. The shaft was fine. It was the head itself, the axe head that had bent.
I think I recall seeing that as well. I thought I remember seeing that was caused by a spinner, but I could be way off-piste. I mean, it makes sense that it would be.
I just saw the picture and didn't read about it.
Lack of due diligence.
Yeah, I know. I'm sorry.
But yeah, axes are cool. More axes, please. Any really key moments from that episode you want to take a look at that we haven't mentioned yet?
Complete ignorance of the rules in the tag teams. I mean that's probably more worth talking about for the next episode.
Yeah, I think the headline there is no one's ever followed the rules in tag teams. No one cares about the rules. The rules are boring. Just have a fun fight.
I want to talk briefly about, I suppose in the intro, sort of like the intro segment for Sabretooth versus Cobra, they're talking about Sabretooth and they're showing shots of so that someone's talking about Sabretooth and then the video is of Aftershock.
Yes.
And I don't understand why, because I can't think of any, other than the fact they've both entered Robot Wars, I don't really know what the link between these robots is. And I wonder if someone just screwed up a little bit while they were editing.
Was it a shot from Aftershock beating the hell out of Sabretooth?
I don't think Sabretooth was in that shot. I mean, I watched it, and I did go back and watch it again, and I didn't think that Sabretooth was in it, but maybe it was. But
I'm fairly sure they used a shot of dead Sabretooth being given some more by Aftershock. So I don't know if the person who edited that just then followed on from that shot with Aftershock.
Yeah, maybe, I don't know, but there was definitely just a shot that was just Aftershock. It's like, what? Why have you? This is not the robot that you're talking about. They're not the same.
I mean, it is still better than the book, which has a shot of Cathard and labels it as PP3D, among other glaring errors. And I don't even own the thing. I've just seen these bits around. Actually, I should probably buy that just to fact check it. That's the kind of thing I'd enjoy too much.
Oh dear, we'll move on from complaining about television shows and complain about books instead.
We've got to branch out, you know? We'll go to plays and complain about them as well.
Oh God, can you imagine like a play version of Robot Wars?
It's basically the live event, isn't it?
No, I mean like you go to a stage show and there are people that are dressed up as robots. You know, a couple of people crawling out in a box that looks like Behemoth or something.
Oh, I'm imagining it, and it's so much better than I think you're imagining it.
I mean, maybe you do like an abstract representation of it as well. So you know, like when
interpretive dance.
Yeah, pretty much. So you know, so you've got like a group of people that they come out and they're all sort of like holding arms like a box, and then just in front of them, there's someone just spinning on the spot with their arms out, and they're coming out like cardboard or something.
For some reason, I'm imagining this in place of a nativity. Where it's just children doing it as though it's sort of worshipping their god of Robot Wars.
Oh, God. Oh, dear.
The main scene is Gilbert Green inventing the flipper in a stable.
People come from far and wide to view the wedge flipper. Who would be the three kings who would come to visit? Wheelie Big Cheese, would they go along?
Yeah, Roger Plant is there. Rex Garrod is there. The Firestorm team are there.
Oh dear.
Oh God, whoever gets left with the role of narrator has to do a Jonathan Pierce voice for the whole thing.
Oh, that would be great. If ever you're in charge of a school's nativity, then you know what you need to do.
Unfortunately, that ship has sailed. I've missed my opportunity there. Talking of pantomime, as we basically were, Apollo trying to get Killalot over.
Oh.
Planned or unplanned?
I mean, I suspect the Apollo team planned to do it, and I would imagine the producers would know about it, but maybe not. I don't know. I don't care. I enjoyed watching it. I'm still sad they didn't do it.
I don't think they were as close as people think they were.
I reckon on that. So I think I don't think they've got the power to directly flip it, but I do think that if Killalot hadn't moved, so that there was a point where they had come in from the side on Killalot. I think this is their last attempt to flip it. They come in from the side of on Killalot, and held it there. And I think if Killalot hadn't moved the track and then moved their flipper off of it, I reckon if they could keep driving forwards, I think they might have done it.
How are they meant to drive forwards when all the weight is now down on the tip of the wedge and the drive wheels are off the floor?
Well, I mean, you know, don't take this away from me.
You need this.
I need them to.
So much.
I need it to be possible for them to flip Killalot. I so want them to do it.
If anyone's going to do it, it will either be an exceptionally powerful flipper with a good long arm like Apollo, or it will be a front hinge.
One day, someone will do it.
What really showed in these episodes was the value of having a long arm on a flipper. Because look how easily Apollo got Dead Metal over compared to Eruption trying. It's not that one is more powerful than the other, it's just that one has got a longer arm.
Yeah, I suppose with the length of the arm, yeah, you can. I suppose because the house robots are so heavy, you can't like toss them into the air. I feel like when you're just tossing robots, the length of the arm doesn't make quite as much difference. Whereas to overturn them, especially when they're as wide as Dead Metal is,
It's the wide wheelbase that I think makes Dead Metal the most difficult to flip. Well, the most difficult of the normal ones. For some reason, I do class the Kill-A-Lot as a level above just because it's meant to be massive.
I mean, yeah, it is bigger in every way.
Yeah, I can't help thinking that was something that was not necessarily planned to happen, but there was an understanding that it would probably happen. Given that they have in the past, I believe, been warned about doing that after cease has been called, as, you know, a safety issue of you are meant to stop when cease is called, I feel like they probably had an element of permission there, you know, for the good of the show.
I think there was, I think you're right. I think there was probably an understanding that they might do it.
Yeah, and for once, I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I think for the purposes of entertainment, that is fine.
Yeah, I think understandings like that are fine. I think scripting something less fine.
Oh, we got very close to saying the term gentleman's agreement there. That opened a can of worms.
I didn't say it. I just said there was an understanding. It's completely different.
Shall we move on to the return of the judges sections?
Yes. Shall we start with the good or the bad?
Well, it's a choice of the bad or the bad, so...
Fine, the bad or the worse?
I generally don't know which one you think is worse. Let's start with Sethu as the one that I forgot what it was.
Oh, God, okay, right, the worst one then.
That's a matter of opinion.
It's not a matter of opinion at all.
Okay, carry on.
I'm just trying to find my notes on it now. The conversations with Sethu involved exoskeletons, which apparently count as robots now. Machine learning, which apparently counts as robotics, which is closer. And actually, no, to be fair, the valuable bit from this that I'm disappointed that Dara made light of was how like internet-connected devices are not always a good thing. He's talking about there being like the extreme case of there being this like internet-connected arm and how someone could hack into that, which I think is...
And strangle you!
And strangle someone. But you know, like I think the core of that I think is very valid. Like there are no smart devices like that, like Internet of Things devices in my flat for this very reason. Like we don't have internet connected light bulbs or a smart TV or whatever, all kinds of other crazy things that people buy and put in their house, or like one of those speakers that listens to you all the time. Like those things are not in this flat for this very reason. And I think the fact that Sethu sort of raises this issue and says, you know, all these internet connected things, you know, it's a bit, you know, bad actors can get access to these, and it's also shockingly easy to get access to these things. A lot of the internet connected devices that you can buy today don't implement like very good security, if any, on their connectivity around sort of like your thing. They're just using like completely unencrypted signals through your flat and stuff. So it's like as soon as someone is on your network, then they can just it's just terrible. They're just awful. They don't even
I've
be on the
never
network,
thought about this. But are you someone that would go to the length of, for example, covering up the front-facing camera on your phone?
I haven't done that. I when I had a laptop, there was a cover over the webcam on that, and there's often blue tack over the webcam on my computer as well. So it's sort of like, you know, I'm sort of vaguely aware of it, but I try not to go too mad with it.
I mean, that seems like a reasonable level of caution. How about like having a private conversation near your phone with this idea that microphones can be activated remotely and things?
I'm still fine with that. I'm gonna, oh man, a bit Apple fanboy, and I'm sorry. I don't mean this to be, but like I have an iPhone, and I'm less worried about that than when I had an Android phone. I think if I had an Android phone, I'd be more concerned about the microphone listening to me, because I think it's easier to do that on the Android platform, personally. But that's so I'm less worried about it now than maybe I could otherwise be. But yeah, I think, you know, I there's a balance to these things where, like, I am, like I said, we don't have like an Amazon Echo or anything like that in the flat. I think I bought one to try it for a bit, and then both Hannah and I got a bit creeped out by it and returned it, and there just isn't one in the flat now, and I don't think we ever will if we can at all avoid it. So yeah, I'm conscious of it, and I think while it's convenient to just completely ignore this technology, I will continue to do it. But I'm concerned that at some point it will become like, it's impossible to buy a good television these days that hasn't got some kind of smart feature on it. It's like they're all about being internet connected televisions that have an operating system on them. It's like, no, just give me a television that's dumb. I just want a screen, and they're harder to, well, basically impossible to buy these days. And I'm concerned that the same thing will become true eventually of everything. that no matter what you buy, it will have some kind of internet connectivity and microphones and all kinds of scary things in it. So yeah, for as long as it's convenient to ignore, I will ignore it. But I think things like not having private conversations near my phone, I think is a bit far for me.
I'd not really thought about any of this before, but now that I have a smart TV, not through my choosing, it was just here when I moved in. Now I have that is a bit creepy. But I do, as a rule of thumb, try not to discuss my crimes anyway, so it's not a big lifestyle change for me.
Yeah. I mean, the thing about all these things as well is like, so smart TVs, there is a history of these things doing nasty things. I think in America, there's a brand called Vizio, and they analyse the signal that comes out of any inputs you do into it. They would analyse the signal and figure out what you were watching by basically doing image recognition on what was on the screen, and then they would use that to target adverts at you and stuff. So it's all that kind of rubbish that these companies can get away with for them, shockingly often, with what they harvest about you and then use to sell adverts or whatever else they want to do with that data. And yeah, it's all scary. And then yeah, not to sort of mention all the things that bad actors could do if they wanted to ruin your life, which is, people sort of talk about.
The term bad actors was a little confusing there for a second. I was just thinking of Daisy Ridley again.
No, I mean like bad, I don't know, bad people. You know what I mean? Like, criminals and stuff like. But if someone wants to come in and ruin your life, and it's like this is happening, something that's more and more likely, I think, to happen as people grow up on things like social media, and it's easier and easier for you to suddenly sort of have an audience of people, and then consequently a group of people that don't like the fact you have an audience or whatever, and then it's like, oh, this person's got whatever on their television, and we can grab information, or we can sort of like, oh, we're going to show horrible things on it, or we're going to do whatever. And it's like, it's something that I think is scary for how sort of much access people can sort of have through these smart devices. If you just imagine there was someone that for whatever reason didn't like you, even if it was something like, imagine like a high school breakup. You break up with someone, and the person you broke up with is petty, but also knows a lot about technology, and they decide they're going to make your life miserable for a bit just because they can, and they sit outside your house, break into your Wi-Fi, and just spend all their time telling that your lights are on and off. And just think how that's like, you laugh at that as a bit of a trivial thing, and on the one hand it kind of is, but if you imagine that was happening to you and how little control you have over that would just be awful, absolutely awful thing to happen. So it's, I think this is something to be concerned about, and I think people aren't concerned about it, and they should be.
I'm more laughing because I spent the last couple of days with an 18-month-old child in the house, and his favourite thing to do is turn lights on and off. But it's annoying enough when it's something you can just pick up and move out the way.
Yeah. I mean, that's the other thing as well, is like, not even necessarily malicious things. I mean, if, like I said, if you've got a kid that's like really interested in technology and they just sort of just go and for the fun of it, figure it all out and stuff, how damn irritating it would be if your kid was hacking into your lights and turning them on and off or whatever. It's sort of like, there's so many levels to this. There's these sort of innocent, someone just sort of experimenting and winding you up type thing, all the way up to really horrible things that you can do. Like, you talk about, see celebrities that have had pictures that they've got on their phone that then get backed up to iCloud or whatever, Google Photos or whatever like online service that their phone automatically backs all their photos up to, and then someone gets into that, and then all of a sudden they've got all this ammunition against that famous person that they to blackmail them and stuff like that. It's sort of there's so much to this, and increasingly more and more access given to things that can control your house. Like, you can go and buy a smart thermostat, like the Nest smart thermostat, which you can connect to from outside your network. You don't even need to be on the same network as this thing. You can, if you can get into their whatever Nest account, like their online Nest account, you can then go and screw with the temperature of the house. You can turn all their heating off or turn it all on, and it's sort of stuff like that that's scary, and like people aren't concerned about it. And I think, to sort of try and bring it back a bit, Sethu raises this as a concern, and as an increasing concern, as if we start getting prosthetics or exoskeletons that have some kind of online capability for whatever reason. Like, a lot of big machine learning is done through a connection to the internet, because Google does this a lot, where they've got their huge server arrays doing all the machine learning, and then they send the data to the thing that they want to do. And if that's the model we go with, and all of a sudden you've got this thing that's meant to be improving someone's life that can be accessed from the outside world, from the internet, and screwed around with, and it's very Black Mirror-y, but it's also a very serious, very sort of real possibility, and it's just something people should be concerned about it, and I'm glad that Sethu raised it, and I'm upset that Dara made light of it.
So are you aware of a proposed solution to these problems? Other than not using them, which is, let's face it, a very unlikely way forward.
Well, I mean, so the people... Well, for one, I think we could not use them. I think, there are ways of doing getting the functionality. Like, so I would like smart lights. I would like lights I can turn on and off with my phone, or I can put on some kind of automated system to turn them on and off. But I cannot find ones that aren't reliant on the internet or a network connection. And it'd be great if... So I get why people use it, because I would like that behaviour, and this is the only way to do it. So they just sort of do it. But I would like it if the companies making them, I guess, were more responsible about doing it. Not making these things communicate over unencrypted HTTP. Don't do that. Make them use HTTPS, and then consequently, we need to have a way of signing certificates for these things. I'm not going to get too far into the details of it. There are technical reasons why they're not all secured and encrypted and stuff. I think there's silly reasons, and be nice if people go over them. But the companies that make these things should be more responsible about making sure that these things that they make are secure in some way. They have some level of encryption. And if you're going to do these things and make them internet connected, you need to also update them. There was a big exploit found in the Wi-Fi security protocol, the WPA2, which is what most Wi-Fi things use to manage, to be secure and do that password management and stuff. And I think what was it called, Cracked or something? That was this exploit that can break into your Wi-Fi if you just sort of near it, and then you can analyze the traffic that's going around while they're sort of... I don't know the details of this, and it's annoying. There is a way to break into Wi-Fi as it stands, into WPA2, and a big security hole is the fact that you've got all these devices on the network that are all talking to each other in this unencrypted way, and then they can be exploited to find the password, and that is a problem. And it's sort of so many of these things are such cheap, horrible things from companies that don't care, that go out into the world, and they will never receive an update. They will never be updated to protect against this attack. So it's there's responsibility about making sure they're secure in the first place. I think there should be responsibility for updating them if security things are found. But I think people should just not buy them. Just don't buy internet connected things. Don't make everything connected to the internet. It doesn't make it better. Figure out the behavior you want. Oh, I'd like a programmable light. Okay, well, do that, but it doesn't need to be on the internet to do that, does it? You don't need to have an internet connected light bulb to program the damn thing to come on and off at certain times. It's just be more thoughtful.
I think the thing we often forget when we talk about cybersecurity is that whilst it matters on a personal level of protecting yourself in your home, there's also the issue of larger organisations, and we saw that with the Heartbleed thing with the NHS, where if you're working in part of a massive system like that, the stakes are so much higher. So the thought that simple things like this could compromise big and important systems, I think, is the scarier part for me. I'm almost not worried about myself.
Yeah, that is a very good point.
All it needs is for some idiot to have a sort of unauthorised device, which is probably a slightly authoritarian way of wording it. Someone who works somewhere just using something that makes their day slightly easier that could actually compromise a whole massive system.
Yeah, I mean, you could imagine that someone working in an office somewhere might decide, oh, I'd like to have a Philips Hue light bulb in this place. And they just do it because they don't think about it. It's just a light bulb. I'm just going to change the light bulb. And they do it. And then all of a sudden, that's the entry point that someone can use to come in and break into the entire system. And then, depending on what that office is, that's either inconvenient for a company or it's life-threatening if it's the NHS. It is scary stuff.
Well, thanks for giving me something new to be worried about.
I'm
usually so calm and, non-anxious.
Oh, I'm sorry, man. Well, you can talk about something a bit more cheerful if you want to go and talk about conversations with with Noel Sharkey.
Cheerful for you, maybe.
How is this not cheerful for you? What is your problem? So they talk about ant weights. What is your problem with this?
So that thing I was going to be most annoyed about, here it is.
My goodness me. Okay, then.
This segment about ant weights does nothing to sell the idea of an ant weight. Why are you interviewing Noel Sharkey about this when you've got Alex Shakespeare stood behind him, who knows probably about as much as it's possible to know about this? Why are you talking to Noel Sharkey and then turning around and going, hey, Alex, show us your fun toy. How much did that cost? Flip the pen. When he could be the person that you're having an informed and useful conversation with. All they've done is go, oh, look at the tiny fun things. Oh, look at the slightly bigger thing. Now let's talk about the nuts mini-bots that are basically nothing to do with this. Oh, isn't it fun? They chased Carbide around. Go build an Antweight now, kids. No. Show them working. Show an actual fight between them. Show them that it could be a fun thing to go out and do. This was the most tokenistic bullshit I've seen from Robot Wars yet. And they've wasted a great opportunity to do the thing that we've been crying out for so long, which is actually get kids interested in making stuff. Or adults. It's worked on us. And it's just made me question the whole judges segment thing, because they have got a warehouse full of very clever people. And they've also got, admittedly, a table full of quite clever people. But if you want to talk about robot stuff, especially combat robot stuff, go and talk to the teams. If you want to talk about speed controllers, go talk to Rory. If you want to talk about brushless motors, go talk to Ellis. If you want to talk about axes and hammers, go talk to John Reed. If you want to have a conversation about, you know, the different sort of types of discs and bars that people use, go and talk to Will Thomas. If you want to talk about pneumatics, talk to Michael Oates. Don't just have Noel Sharkey or someone sit there and going, oh, isn't this great? Let's actually try and go into some detail and provide something useful. Otherwise, just don't bloody do it. That's fine too, by the way. Not doing it is also fine. We're not gaining anything from it anyway. It just riled me up inordinately that they did such a bad job of that segment.
I think a part of this is that they're trying to show that the judges are judges, you know, that they are experts in the area. And it's like, if they've got to, if they're going to have, you know, from the other point of view is like, well, why aren't the teams doing the judging? You know, if they're such experts, it's like, I think, you know,
well, because they're involved. they're not neutral.
But like, you know, or teams that aren't necessarily, you know, in that round or in that thing, or even in the whole competition. You know, bring whatever, like Ian Lewis in and to do it and stuff. Like, you know,
ooh, where'd you get that idea from?
I wonder. So I think part of it is like, well, we've got the judges and they are these experts in the field and stuff. So we're going to talk to them about the things and show that they do know what they're on about.
Having them talking about the stuff they've been talking about, fair enough, because, you know, that is the stuff they work on in their day jobs. But I think we've kind of got to the end of that usefulness now. I'd much rather see them talking about combat robots. The only other time we've had them talk about combat robots, we had Lucy Rogers talking about how to defend against spinners by using an angle grinder.
That is true. That did happen.
If you want to engage the judges and show off their skills, let them talk about the decisions they're making as judges, which is something that we've again been sort of calling out for a while. Okay, there's been a tight battle or a controversial call. Let them explain why they made that decision. Get rid of some of the stupid filler that we've got and let them actually talk about the job they're doing. That's the time we want to hear from them. That's the time they have something really valuable to say in the context of Robot Wars. And these sections are basically there as the BBC fulfilling their, not obligation is too strong a word, but their sort of need to promote science and technology. But they're not doing a very good job of it.
So what if you look at this from the point of view of someone who's not making a podcast about combat robots? You know, someone who's just much more casually watching it, who doesn't even know that Antweights are a thing. All they know about robot combat is that Robot Wars is a thing. They don't know about the live scene. They don't know about all the different weight classes. All they know is these big, heavy machines that cost potentially thousands of pounds to build. And then they see this and they go, oh, look, that's a small one that I could build. And this is the first thing this is the first time they've learned that Antweights are even a thing. And they make the point that, you know, Antweight, I think they sort of say that, you know, Antweights are a thing that a lot of people build and that there are fights for Antweights and stuff. So it's sort of like, you know, what if this is the in for someone, that they see this and they learn Antweights are a thing, fantastic, and then they go and look it all up and then they find all the information and then they build one. That's
exactly what I want to happen, but I don't think this segment has achieved that.
But it's shown that Antweights exist, where there's been acknowledgement on the one thing that person knows exists. They know only of Robot Wars, that's all they know about. And then they see on that programme, Antweights are a thing, yeah? And if it wasn't on the programme, maybe they'd never even learn that Antweights were a thing, and they wouldn't even try and build a heavyweight robot because they wouldn't know where to begin. Whereas they see, oh, look, there's an Antweight. Okay, I will try and build that.
How does my idea of letting Alex talk about them not achieve that and achieve it better? By him being able to give more detail on it.
I'm not saying that at all. I think having Alex do it would be good as well. I'm just saying, though, let's just assume that they've decided that, right, we're going to have a judges segment and we're going to have a conversation with a judge. And with that requirement, yeah, I think this is good. I think this is a good use of that to sort of introduce that antweights do exist and they are a thing, so that the huge number of people that watch Robot War, the relatively huge number of people that watch Robot Wars that then don't go and live and breathe it on Reddit, don't go to the FRA forums, don't make podcasts about it and stuff. All of those people now know that antweights exist, and some of them might then start going to the Reddit and going to the FRA and building these antweights and stuff.
It is, for that reason, a good choice of thing to talk about, but the execution is badly lacking. I mean, just think of this as an advertisement for a second. There are some key sort of... what's the word I'm looking for? Key sort of ingredients to a good advertisement, which is to show the person what it is, show them why they want it, and then give a call to action. So they've shown what it is. Big tick. Have they really shown why someone would want it? Oh, it can throw a pen. Why not have a quick battle there? Why not get a little box, one of the little battle boxes in there? They're not difficult to cart around. Actually show a battle. Most of them only last 30 seconds anyway. Show them that. That's the why they want it. And then the call to action is not just the, oh, how much did this cost? But it's the, okay, what do you need to make it? Where do you get that? How do you get involved? If you want to know more, where do you go? There's none of that. So what I imagine happening for most people is they see that. If there's someone who might be interested in antweights or could become interested, their attention is piqued by, oh, there's an antweight. And then there's a featherweight. And then, oh yeah, I remember that fight between Nuts and Carbide. That was good. What were we talking about again? Oh, I'll just watch the crap fights in the rest of the episode now. I think it was a real opportunity to properly capture people's interest and direct them to a great thing that is happening in the antweight scene that has been almost entirely wasted.
So I agree that this could be better, but what I get from you is that you'd rather they didn't do it. They were sort of like, either do it properly or don't do it. And by properly, I mean do it the way that you want them to do it.
I'm stuck in between those positions. I'm glad they tried it, but so frustrated that they did it so badly. And I feel like because they've done it badly, they're now not going to come back and do it well. I feel like this is the one time they were going to talk about this, and it's now gone. It's in the past. We're not going to see it again. And that's the part that frustrates me. There's no potential for it to happen again better to me.
See, I'm just trying to think why it is the way it is. I think we probably both grossly overestimate how much time, thought and planning is put into these judges segments. I think it is very much, maybe not last minute, but I think it's very, very underprepared. I think it's just, and I think there always will be. I think they're all like this. It's just sort of like, oh, quickly go and film. I'll go, Dara, go and film with one of the judges about something. Just ask him a question and see where it goes, kind of thing. I think it's not far from that.
I mean, this looks quite planned in that, they've had those robots there. As much as Alex loves his antweights, I somehow doubt that he's just carrying them around all the time. And the featherweight that was there, there's no reason for that to be there except for this. They did, for Series 10, start taking applications for featherweights, but never went any further with it. So I don't know if it's maybe a leftover from that. Maybe it's one that comes from Robo Challenge. I didn't recognise the specific feather. But you feel like this actually not more than most, they have the technology usually brought in to show. The Connect 4 robot, I doubt they just had lying around.
No, that's true. I don't know. I think they just often do, maybe not the bare minimum they need to do, but I don't think that it is as thought through as you want it to be. I think them bringing in a little arena to do an outweight fight in, I think is well beyond what the scope of what they want to do with this.
Oh yeah, that's a step further than they're going, but I think it's the level of effort they should be putting into it.
Okay.
You know what? The simplest thing they could have done is plugged their own book about how to build a robot. They didn't even do that. They didn't even try and sell their own product. I don't know if that has an antweight build in it or not. I've not looked at it. I think it has a featherweight in it, and I know it has a heavyweight in it. So, even that, as a call to action, go buy our book. It's not very expensive kind of thing. I don't know if I'm not sure the BBC are really allowed to do that. That's the only thing.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask you earlier. Is like, what would you have them point to? Because it's not as if they can go, I'll go to nutsandbots.co.uk and then go and buy some stuff there. They're not going to be able to do that.
What you do is you take the website you already have and barely use and put a page on it of info.
But like, what does their website link to? I mean, I don't know what they're allowed to link to in terms of like, advertising and stuff. Like, are they allowed to link to a specific shop, or are they just going to say you need to go and find a speed controller? You're on your own.
I mean, I don't know how they deal with it in the book, but I imagine they deal with it in the same way online. If nothing else, it links to a page that says, here is what an amp weight is, here are the requirements. You know, it has to be 150 grams, has to fit within a 4-inch cube, you know, ideally don't explode and don't have a water pistol. All those boring rules.
The thing is, I think that having if you're going to do like, here's a bunch of resources about building an amp weight, I think you do need to link to specific places. I think we discussed this earlier, like where if there wasn't a place where I could go and buy a speed controller and motors from and have confidence they were going to work, if I had to go and trawl around on eBay, I wouldn't do it. And that's evidenced by the fact that until now, I've not done this before. Like the one time I have done building of electronics, trawling around on eBay and all kinds of other sites trying to find the components is a nightmare, and I don't enjoy doing that bit of it. Whereas if it's sort of like, oh, here's a bunch of stuff that's, you know, 90% going to work together and stuff, here's the building blocks, go. You know, I think you do need to be able to link to something specific and say, buy these things, buy this transmitter, buy this receiver, buy these speed controllers and stuff. It's sort of like that. That, I think, brings the barrier sufficiently low that I think far, far more people would do it. So it's like, and if the BBC are making this calculus of sort of like, can we do that? I mean, if the BBC have a website and they say you need these things of it, I guarantee they will get a bunch of support effectively. They get people contacting them, asking for specific things. I mean, like, will this work with this? If I buy these two things, will they work together? You know, or can you recommend me a transmitter to buy? And, you know, maybe they're making the calculation there of like, that's just not worth it to us. You know, maybe it's sort of like we're gonna put the idea out that amp weights exist, but we're not even going to try and give any advice on it. We're just going to say they exist, and that's enough. Because if we do any more than that, we start opening ourselves up to having people ask us for technical support and advice.
I agree with all of that, but the value judgment that I make is that work would be worthwhile. I can understand them making a different judgment, but I don't like that judgment. If they cared as much as I want them to care, they would be able to find a way. And obviously, being the BBC, the rules are a bit different. But as I say, if nothing else, surely you can at least mention your own product. Surely as the barest minimum. Even just put it on the bloody title card at the end. Oh, this book is out now. I feel like that's not beyond what they're allowed to do. And if it is, then the BBC is stupid anyway in the way it runs, but that would be an extra level of stupid.
That's not beyond the realms, because at the end of Blue Planet 2 or whatever, there's an ad for some poster that you can write in and get. So they could put a little thing at the end being like, if you want to build an amp weight, we have a book about it. I think they could do that.
I'm glad that you watch enough TV to have an example of that being doable. The only thing I use a TV for is Robot Wars. I am very conscious of time, so I want to move on from this.
Yes, let's move on.
I hope there is a discussion about this in comments and feedback and things, because for me, this is the by far most annoying thing that has happened in the reboot of Robot Wars to date, and I'm irrationally annoyed about it.
I think this was a good judges segment, and I'm glad it was there.
So, episode 2, robots.
Yeah.
We've kind of gone over it, but do we want to talk about the Bash as a robot? Do we want to try and analyse it as a piece of machinery?
Well, it was awful, as evidenced by the fact that it did one fight and then got replaced.
This is in a category adjacent to, but distinctly separate from Jellyfish, in that it is something that has been built with a very specific purpose that wasn't to win. So I think, you know, in competitive terms, it gets a complete pass from me, because they wanted to make something that was kind of a tribute to an old robot, and they wanted to do it super on the cheap and make a little YouTube series of how they built it to show people how this stuff works. Full pass from me. I don't love it, but it does what it wanted to do. And I really hope that the issue they had wasn't to do with the expensive speed controllers they had in it that were the only thing that was worth anything. I really hope those things survived.
So you sort of say that their purpose in this was to provide a tribute to an old robot. And I think with the one qualification that it's cheap. So if we ignore and do it cheaply qualification, I think what they built wasn't even good as a tribute. I think the fact that I think the restriction of doing it on the cheap is what has failed this for me. So it's sort of like, if you get, I think as a tribute to Sergeant Bash, I think it's rubbish, and I'm sorry, but it just is. It's just a rubbish. It's just rubbish. It doesn't look enough like Sergeant Bash. It doesn't have the flamethrower, and I understand why they can't have the flamethrower, but like that's it's just lacking in so much. But doing it on the cheap is obviously the cause of that. I think you can't build a robot that captures anything about Sergeant Bash that is done cheaply. I don't think you can do that. I think that's a fair thing to say, that if you're going to do it really cheap, you're probably not going to be able to get something that captures Sergeant Bash. The other thing you just mentioned that I'd sort of forgotten about was the YouTube series of building it. So it's sort of like that is a good thing to have done. So I think as far as being a tribute to Bash, it fails. I think it's good they did a YouTube series about building it, and I'm mostly just disappointed in the BBC for hyping it up as Bash. They sort of like the tweets and all that kind of stuff about Bash returning is just upsetting, and I really wish they hadn't done that, because I think it soured my view of the Bash unfairly. I fully admit that my opinions on this are really biased against it because of what the BBC did, and I think that's unfair, but it's what's happened.
I must admit that when I first saw it, it didn't meet the expectation I had in my head. But that's because my expectation was unrealistic. If I'd seen that and not known what it was going to be, I'd have gone, haha, I like that. I wouldn't have gone, I think it's going to win, but I'd have gone, yes, I like that, fair play. So I'm trying to maintain that view, because I think that is the fairest view I can have on it.
Yeah, and I think if it looked more like Sergeant Bash, I would be happier with it. If the thing is, it's so far...
It's got the key features.
It's so far from the shape of Bash, of Sergeant Bash and stuff. It's just, it's not close enough for me.
It is a bit more Velociraptor than it is Bash, but again, I'm fine with that. I don't think they set out with very high expectations, and they then had high expectations thrust upon them. So I'm full of sympathy with them on that. What I do like is that they very clearly knew they were probably going to need a backup and brought Tough as Nails, which is a robot that I love. So if the Bash did nothing else, it gave us a chance to see Tough as Nails again. Admittedly, in possibly the worst matchup available.
What was the first one that it fought?
Its only fight was against Thor.
Oh, yeah, it wasn't going to do very well against that.
No, it's optimized to lose against Thor, pretty much, as a design. If you had to design a perfect robot for Thor to be, you'd basically get Tough as Nails, which is unfortunate for them, because it's a good design. A bit dated, but it's a good design. It's interesting, it's different, and it does have some good sort of internals on it as well. So basically, they've brought 2 versions of Jellyfish with them. That's what they've done.
Yeah, I love this team so much.
I do wonder if Tough as Nails would work with a kind of internal wedge.
What do you mean?
So what I'm imagining, and I'm miming this out as though that helps, is imagine Tough as Nails as it is with the jaws. At the sort of body part, maybe a little wedge on that, so that stuff doesn't get under it as easily whilst in the jaws. Because it always did well against boxy robots, which, let's face it, at the time it was competing, a lot of robots still were. Whereas now, pretty much everything has a wedge of some variety, or a front-mounted weapon that is going to wreck you before it needs a wedge. Tough as Nails team, you can have that idea for free. Because I know you've been waiting for a random podcast person to come along and tell you how to fix your robot.
The saviour of Robot Wars has just given you an idea for free. I mean, what more could you want in life?
I accept payment in cash or check. Weber. Looks awesome. I love the way this robot looks. It really does. It's kind of got the look of Beast, but slightly better.
Yeah.
I still don't see why people look at a robot like this and go, oh, it's got no armour, it's going to be awful. It's like, yes, that's true if you're just up against a spike that can get through, but against most things, that style of armour is perfectly effective.
Yeah, I guess spikes or Shunt's axe, I think, are the 2 things that would spring to mind for that armour being rubbish against it. But I think for most weapons that we see, I think that armour is perfectly fine, and it looks cool. So, wins all round.
The one thing I wish they'd drawn attention to on the show that I think people need to understand to put its performance in context is that it only weighs 70 kilograms when it's up against 100 to 110 kilo robots. So in that respect, it's not only done okay, it's done very well. Yeah, it does have quite a low CO2 capacity, which I think is a factor of the weight. The driving wasn't the best. They seemed to fire the flipper a bit too early on quite a few occasions, but boy, has that held its own well.
It is. Yeah, it is good. It's a good little robot.
Better than their attempt for King of Bots, that's for sure.
What was their... I saw that one. What was that?
Stingray, the pseudo drum spinner that didn't do very well. We won't say too much because hopefully we're going to do some King of Bots stuff, but yeah, their flipper's better than their drum spinner. Cathar, we've kind of spoken about.
I think we've covered most of it, yeah. These guys, they had the longest sort of like interview with a presenter of all teams ever. Like in terms of just like the longest uncut section of speech talking about the guys. It was this guy that had the cafe or the restaurant or whatever that he ran that had the robot, which sounds like a really awesome idea, and it's sad and unsurprising that wasn't financially viable. But yeah, that was an amazingly long interview segment, and it was just amazing that it just went for so long without it being cut, because the guy can clearly just talk very well at length about something, and there was no, I don't know where you could have cut it if you wanted to, so it was just quite funny. There was like, that's just a really long uncut section of speech from this guy.
I don't want to stereotype, but it does make sense that one of the best uncut bits of interview was with an American. He had that sort of stereotypical self-confidence and personability that made him a great captain on here as well.
Oh yeah, he was very, very likeable.
And actually honest about his emotions after that tag team. He was willing to be upset about it. Whereas I think there's a reservedness around that usually in Robot Wars.
How scripted was that?
I'm going to say completely unscripted.
You think that was unscripted? I'd say, because it's just sort of like... So I have two problems with this. One, I think that was completely scripted. I think they were told to do that for drama reasons. And the other thing that's annoying is like, well, why is Dara the one that's adjudicating that? Why have you not got the judges adjudicating this situation?
Normally I'm the first to call shenanigans, but it just didn't come across that way to me. I think the reason that Dara is the person doing it is that he's gone over there to do an interview and walked into the middle of that. That's what I imagine has happened there. I mean, only the people who are involved know, but...
And then does Dara have the authority to just say, right, points all around, or whatever the decision was?
I mean, it's kind of come in and Michael has decided to hand the points over. I feel like if there were an issue with that, judges would step in and change that decision.
Poor Michael.
In which case, that bit of footage never sees the light of day.
Yeah.
It's certainly better than the share the points idea from the Pulsar Ironside fight. I think part of the reason that it might come off as scripted is that obviously it's given a sense of respectability to the overall scores, in that they would have been whitewashed without that. So I can see a shenanigans call based on that, but...
No, I was calling shenanigans while it was happening. So it wasn't like, in retrospect, I looked and thought, oh, well, and because of the points, that must have been shenanigans. It was like, while that was on TV, I was like, this seems a bit much.
I don't know, nothing about it sort of tripped my shenanigan senses. Maybe someone who was involved, the DRT team, the team part being redundant there. Maybe they'll say something in the AMA they've got coming up this week that I imagine will have happened by the time we get this episode out. So hopefully we'll have our answers. I mean, if need be, I'll just ask the question. I have the power here,
I mean, the thing is, if that's not shenanigans, that's just outright cheating as well, which is like, that's also bad.
I mean, that's just part of the history and tradition of a tag team battle in Robot Wars. They almost always ended up as a 2 versus 2 battle. I'm not sure it's really changed the fight. Their weapon belt had already gone.
Oh yeah, like watching the slow-mo, they were already disabled before, concussion came out and whacked them. So like it wouldn't have made any difference, but yeah, it was... You only know that looking at the slow-mo, I think. I
don't know if you've heard any more about this than I have, but apparently they were trying out some slightly different entanglement rules for this episode, with those big loops of sort of thick wire on the front of Thor, which I believe wouldn't have previously been allowed.
Wouldn't they? Interesting, okay. Did they have to be like a length of something? They couldn't be a loop of something?
I'm not sure. I just read something somewhere that was kind of half the information. I wasn't sure if you'd seen anything else.
No, I hadn't, I'm afraid.
I feel like because it's a loop, that might not have previously been allowed, but I couldn't pinpoint the part of the rules where it was. Or maybe it was something that was kind of a grey area that they thought they'd just give a go. I don't know. It was an interesting way of doing it and seemingly very effective. Because it was basically just zip-tied onto the robot, so it would be a nice, easy breakaway thing.
Yeah.
Next up, last and very much least, Terror Turtle.
Oh, poor thing. I agree. Very much least.
Terror Turtle is what it is, isn't it? It's a fun robot. It's another one where the builder has placed design limitations on himself. Those limitations are kind of what's made him happy, where he's got his satisfaction. And I'm glad it competed. It's about as much as I can give it.
I mean, it didn't get too beaten up.
No, but it also managed to lose to a robot that was literally on fire. All it had to do was not stop working.
That fire was spectacular. Yeah,
Oh.
I mean, to lose to that was quite funny. But yeah, I think that's the retirement for Terror Turtle now, right? It's done.
That's what John Frizzle said. He may change his mind. I mean, it is the kind of robot that you might as well roll out to really get smashed up one more time.
Yeah. I don't know how I feel about these robots that are useless. Like Terror Turtle.
I mean, you've kind of made your feelings clear in the past.
I do know how I feel, but I feel bad expressing them. Maybe that's a fairer way to say it. I'm sorry, Terror Turtle. I don't think you should have been here.
I mean, no one involved with that robot is going to be under any illusions as to its potential. And something like this is probably the right place for it, were it not being presented as being so hyper-competitive. This is the kind of place where I'd love to see a robot like this, because it can come in, go out in the first round, but it's added some value and added some variety. It's represented a country that wouldn't have otherwise been represented, and everyone's happy. Because it's been put into a thing where they're being made to look like they're really trying to win, it feels a bit out of place. But, it nearly beat Big Nipper.
It did, I suppose, nearly beat Big Nipper.
Well, it nearly scored a victory against Big Nipper is probably a slightly more accurate way of putting it.
It nearly technically won.
It has technically been upgraded since last time we saw it. It's replaced the old disc with one of the bars from the kegs.
It has got a bar now.
So that's a change, if not an upgrade.
Is it an upgrade or not? I don't know. I don't know enough about the difference between discs and bar spinners to say which is better. I suspect, judging by the fact that basically everyone does a bar spinner these days, I suspect a bar is better.
I don't want to act like I know more than I do, because I know that this is a very complex thing, but my understanding is that you can get a higher tip speed for the same weight out of a bar, because it can be longer for the same weight. And also, if you're going horizontal against vertical, having a disc is quite bad, because it's a lot to get hit. Your tooth to other surface ratio is low. So I think that's the very, very basics of that decision-making progress of disc versus bar. Again, I feel like that's not a process that they've necessarily gone through in designing Terror Turtle. I'm not sure they've worried about all of that, but, they had those nice shiny new bars, you might as well use them. But this is the opportunity to talk about Big Nipper, really, isn't it?
Yeah.
I was so pleased to see them using the jaws, because it's not necessarily a meta weapon, but it's entertaining to see. And then to be fair, it got a really good grip on Terror Turtle before it got hit. It probably shouldn't have been the one to get hit, given that they'd driven Terror Turtle into that CPZ, but boy, it was worth it.
The way it went, I mean, that was spectacular. They should have driven to the pit release button. They should have breathed near the button to see if they could have triggered a fog of war to put them out.
That's actually not a bad idea at all. They have, I believe, used the fog of war to try and help put fires out. So, in fact, didn't they show a shot of that at one point this series or in these specials?
Yeah, possibly after this or one of the many fights where Dietor or some of Dietor's fur on another robot caught fire. I think they did have a shot where they fired all the fog of war to put it all out.
It would be in my notes somewhere.
Yeah. I'm amazed that Big Nipper kept working at all after the batteries were hanging out and on fire. Like, what? How much redundancy is in that robot that it could still work after that at all?
I can only assume that it was only the weapon system that was hit by that. But it is a very, very well-built robot. We saw it shrugging off hits from Aftershock.
Yeah, it's just astonishing.
I had been part of a conversation, I think it was on the Unofficial Robot Wars Facebook group, with one of the Coopers, either Grant or James. So one of the guys from Robo Challenge that built the House Robots, about the power that Matilda has in the flywheel. Because it's kind of hard to tell on a robot of that size whether it's got much power in it. If you had a disc that size on something like Aftershock, it would obviously be ridiculous. It'd probably be barely able to drive because of it. But I think because it's on such a big robot, it doesn't seem as powerful as it is. And this is the demonstration of its power that I needed to understand that.
Yeah, it's brutal. Absolutely brutal. I guess that means there are like two ways in the arena then where you can be like one hit killed. I guess it's like you can be unlucky with Matilda, or you can go into the pit. Are the two like ways you can instantly take yourself out. Like I'm ignoring someone throwing you out of the arena and stuff like that. But if like for you to lose the battle, yeah.
I mean, all of the house robots have the potential to one hit you if you get unlucky with a removable link or unlucky with an aerial. But I suppose that's more of a fringe case than,
Yeah, I mean, all the other ones are all the other house robots, it's so unlikely that they'll one hit you that it's just a vanishingly small chance of that happening. I think the only other robot that's really capable of intentionally doing, well, maybe this isn't true. Obviously, Kill-A-Lot, I think, could basically slice through near enough anything with its huge claw thing. So it's like, I think that's got a lot of potential for doing a lot of damage, but that's also a much more controlled weapon, so I don't think that's not accidentally going to happen, right? Whereas, Matilda, there's, you don't know what's going to happen when you hit that flywheel against something. So it's just sort of it's much more likely to be like a one hit and then you're done.
I think the decision-making process for anyone who's driving Matilda is, do I want to run the risk of smashing something up by going in backwards, or do I go more conservative by going forwards?
I mean, what's funny about that is going forwards with those flipper isn't even much more conservative in many ways.
Not at all, no.
Because those tusks are ridiculously powerful. I sort of always think, they're just little lifters. Like in my mind, they're like like panic attacks forks. That's all they do, but they're just not. They are properly powerful things that can throw robots around. I mean, that's a big part of what took Tom Hawk's axe off. I think is because it got flipped by Matilda, and then while it was firing its axe, and that's sort of like the thing that put all the force through to shear it off. So it's sort of. Yeah, they're ridiculously powerful tusks as well.
With what you were saying about your mental image of Matilda, that's probably because they used to be a lot like panic attacks forks.
Yeah.
In that just the tusks moved, but now the whole head does.
Yeah.
So there's a lot more power in that movement. And a lot more distance is the word I was going to inappropriately use there. There's more movement. Hasn't gone well. It's more Apollo than eruption,
Yeah,
that's the
tips.
General thing I'm trying to go with here.
The ends of the tasks move a lot further than they used to, yeah.
It's basically a longer flipper arm. Yeah, Matilda is really the true beast of the house robots, I think. Although I will always love Dead Metal, just for the control.
Yeah. I think Matilda's definitely the underdog there. It's always the one that, even though I now know this, I still underestimate that robot. I still think, that's nothing. That's the rubbish house robot. Ha ha ha. And then it comes out and just destroys things in one shot. So it's sort of like, it's definitely the scariest of them, I think.
Maybe a bit of a glass cannon, just in terms of how easily it is to flip.
Yeah.
Although Sergeant Bash used to be the one for that, really.
Bring back Bash. Do it.
They have. And you were unhappy. I mean, what more do you want? On the subject of house robots, we saw Dead Metal taking one hell of a risk against concussion by bringing the saw down on the spinning drum, and it held up.
Yeah. I was amazed that they A, did that, and B, that it worked.
I feel like they were maybe in a position where, because this was near the end of the series filming, they felt they could take slight risks like that, just in the hope of a spectacular shot.
Maybe that's also why Apollo was allowed to go and try and flip Kill-A-Lot.
Yes. Yeah, there was a moment, I think it was after the Big Nipper Terror Turtle fight, where either James or Grant Cooper was in the background of the interview, sort of stooping over one of the house robots and looking really worried. So I'm thinking that one of them might have taken some damage at some point that he was sort of trying to think about getting fixed. I'm wondering if it was Dead Metal suddenly not working as well as it should after that. But either way, I was expecting that thing to just, fall to pieces under that kind of pressure.
Yeah, I was expecting to just shatter, but it didn't.
Hey, isn't Pussycat in its debut season? System? It's not Pussycat. I've ruined it. I've ruined that joke. It was a nice niche old series reference, my bread and butter, and I messed it up.
Yeah, you failed.
Any other things from this second episode that you want to draw attention to?
I don't think so. Jonathan Pierce asked if Thor could flip a robot out of the arena.
Oh, Jonathan. Jonathan knew what a lithium polymer battery was. That impressed me. It wasn't lithium polymer armament, at least.
Oh, God. Oh, dear.
He was responsible, along with many other people, for a real bugbear of mine. And this is Of all the really picky things I've said so far today, this is probably the worst. Calling it a Union Jack.
Oh, God.
It's a Union flag. Just is. Although, you know what I absolutely loved about the UK team? All of the robots painted a Union flag on them, except Gabriel, which just painted its own name all over it.
Oh, amazing.
I'm not sure if it was some sort of tacit anti-patriotic message. Just sort of, just spray Gabriel 2 all over it. It'll be fine.
Just do that, yeah. I thought the painting of the flags just kind of ruined the aesthetic for all of the robots, really. They all looked worse for it.
Oh, it worked on Concussion. Concussion did it in a really tasteful way where they just sort of kept it down to a single panel on the back. I thought that looked really good. It also wasn't bad on Terahertz. It's just Terahertz looks weird with colour on it.
Yeah, it does indeed.
Actually, that's a point. I think this makes John Reed the only person, if not only, then definitely one of the only, to have represented 2 different nations in Robot Wars. Because in a previous World Series, Kilohertz represented the Czech Republic because his co-driver was Czech. And, you know, they were into being tenuous back then.
That's pretty impressive. Well, I think we're done.
I too think we're done.
You can find the show notes for this episode at spinnerproof.com/episodes/21. And there you can find links to all the robots we've been talking about today. You can also find a link to our Twitter at Spinnerproof, where you can tweet to us your favourite moment from the international specials. Or you could tweet to us your reasons why Sergeant Bash should return. So in our last episode, we were talking about The Last Jedi. We've both seen it, and then we did a big podcast talking about it. And since recording that, I've had more time to think about it, and I've also listened to a bunch of other podcasts about it, and I wanted to just talk about one thing where my mind has changed a little bit.
My mind has probably changed because I just can't remember what I thought last time.
Your mind has changed because that's what you do.
You know, time has passed. That's just how I work.
So, all the usual spoiler warnings, and I will dive into the scene in question now. And I think you can probably hear my mind begin to change during the conversation, and it's about Leia Poppins.
Okay.
So when we talked about it, I had 2 major issues with this scene. I had issues with the fact that Leia was using the Force, and I had issues with the way they did it just in terms of filmmaking. And I have softened my position now. I am okay with the fact that Leia has used the Force. That's fine. And these circumstances under which she used it are the thing that convinced me. So what I was talking about was it seemed a bit ridiculous to think that someone could use the Force in their dying moments. But then you made a point of like, well, that's probably, that's the time when it's most likely to accidentally use the Force or suddenly be able to reach out and do that is when you need it the most. And I think I agree with that. So that's fine. I think Leia using the Force under those circumstances, absolutely fine with that now. I've thought about it some more. I'm fine with it. It's cool. I still don't like the way it's done. I still don't like that scene. I don't like the fact that it's Leia Poppins. I don't like the fact that she opens her eyes in space. Despite everything else in that being completely unrealistic, that's the thing that annoys me the most for some reason. So that still bothers me. But yeah, I just wanted to put that out there. Leia using the Force, I'm fine with it.
Interesting, because I had a conversation about that scene yesterday, with Hannah in fact, where something was pointed out to me that I hadn't thought that apparently a lot of other people thought in that scene, which is that they thought she was dead and came back to life. Now, I at no point during that scene thought, oh, she must be dead because she's out in space. I think a lot of people assume that once you go into the vacuum of space, you are dead, and that is an almost immediate thing. I think a lot of people still believe the idea of your body puffing up and exploding because people. And I think had I thought that, had I perceived it that way, I would have had a big problem with that scene. I don't know, was that something that you thought when it happened? Do you think that would change your mind on it back?
I don't think she was dead when she got blown out. I think she was maybe sort of, she was just still for a bit. I mean, this is part of the thing about the way that's shot, it's sort of ambiguous because she's still for so long that it's like, that's it, she's dead. But like, as soon as she started moving, I guess I immediately retconned it. It's like, well, she was never dead. She was just sort of like there for a bit. And then, maybe like out cold for a few moments and then woke up again. I don't think she was dead. I think if it was a case of resurrection, then yeah, that would be. I'd have much bigger problems with that.
I viewed that whole scene as being in slow motion as well, or at least the start of it being in slow motion, which I think helps with my idea of, she's been out there a while and all of that. I viewed that as being a much smaller snapshot of time. I'm trying to work out, how long do you think you can survive in space? Because you've got to have at least a few seconds of consciousness.
I think it's 30 seconds or so. I don't think it's very long.
That's the sort of figure I had in my mind of consciousness.
Because you're right. It's not as if you go out there and immediately start puffing up. It's just sort of like you got two problems. You got you can't breathe, and you probably can't hold your breath either. I think when you're in the vacuum, you just get the air in your lungs get sucked out. I think.
Yeah, the strongest jaw in the world isn't keeping that in.
I mean, maybe you can hold it if you're, because I don't know. I don't know the mechanics of can you hold it, and if you can, how long can you hold it for? So I think that's part of the problem. But I think the bigger thing is it's so damn cold, and they did show that. I mean, she starts freezing, so it's like that is a big part of the problem of being in space. If you're just exposed to the vacuum of space, you're going to freeze pretty quickly.
But that's the kind of thing that's only a problem if you survive.
Yeah.
The thing I remember most is hearing or reading or seeing the story of a NASA test that went wrong where they had somebody in a vacuum chamber and for some reason they were exposed to vacuum when they shouldn't have been. And that person was able to describe what happened, which makes me think that there's quite a lot of consciousness going on. So he's describing sort of the feeling of the saliva on his tongue boiling off.
Yeah.
And then presumably eventually losing consciousness, but obviously being revivable. So
Yeah.
all of that makes this... And this doesn't matter in a fantasy film anyway, but that all makes it super plausible to me.
In a sci-fi film.
I was wondering if you'd respond. Yeah, I'm willing to give all of that a pass, which is weird because my suspension of disbelief during the film was very poor. I think the film actively discourages suspension of belief for large periods. It pulls you out of itself repeatedly. But in that one moment, I was completely willing to accept all of it.
Yeah. Well, that's all I had to say about it, really.
Boom.